when advanced civilizations wake up. During the human experience, an individual perception arose that on every possible celestial object, planetary object, in the middle of nowhere, through the arrival of creaturehood, there is the arrival of the collective dimensions of the creature. And so in advanced civilization, this idea is a universal, because when we wonder about conscious intelligence's future, it is towards its advancement. Advancement being more reality in consciousness. That means if we were to look at human beings, we're kind of like logging into human reality after 100 years logging out, right? And so when we log into the human experience, it's like there's a conscious range and there's like a conscious space, which is our mind, and this mind, like a sponge, receives a certain dimensions of the world, and then eventually we transition away, we exit the system, we log out of the user interface, biological user interface, practically. To me, I have talked about it in other episodes that there's something called the Song of Advanced Civilizations, the Songs of the Advanced Civilization. And what it is that at some point, individual intelligence collectively manifests itself. And if somebody was to ask, what is the greatest invention of the human being? It is its own eyes. The greatest invention of the human being is how far this intelligence can be used, And of course, guys, I have to say this, that, not everyone is perfect. And because of our imperfection, sometimes we can lack sensitivity to our emotional dimensions, and sometimes we can lack sensitivity to our ideological dimensions. It's as if we have two brain hemispheres, and based on the nature of our work, that brain hemisphere becomes more active, even though a lot of brain activity is the frontal lobe and around the cortex, I believe it's called. And something that I don't know if people know, but when it comes to how would I say it? I'll start from here by saying that our attention, due to different percentage, everybody has a different percentage of how much their attention is in their outer realms and how much their attention is in their inner realms. Right now, for example, I'm sitting down and I'm sharing a talk, I'm communicating. Communication is an inner event. So right now, when I'm speaking to you, I am more a mind than a body, and so that means I am more in my inner realms than my outer realms. But if I was to suddenly run or go grab something or whatever, it would be, in some sense, I would be more in my outer realms. Now, an advanced civilization is the ultimatum to humanity's option. That means there's this one view where we're like, we don't want the human species to go extinct. Then there's this other view, okay, the human species didn't go extinct, what does it do now? And when we get to that level of a question as a planet, as a planetary species, when we wonder about the future of giants, not just those who are on the shoulder of giants, every person present in any nation is like a person on the shoulder of a giant, right? Our humanism has led to culturalism. Our culturalism has made our humanism turbulent. Therefore, a sort of I don't want to say reconfirmation, but an alignment of the humanism. So right now I would say we are that wave of human beings in history who walked into linguistic simulations overlaid upon reality, and the idea of mankind is like we are like the pioneers of the humanity that will walk this earth. And as the pioneers, what do the future expect from us? To explore, to discover. That means I would say the purpose of life is to discover its source. An advanced civilization is pretty much the natural result of individual points in a system networking. Right now, people's minds are separate. It's like every person's mind is in their own room, and then all of our minds are in like one physical room. That's how it appears now. If we realize that there are no rooms and that mind is space, when the human being starts having a relationship with unconditional intelligence in space, which is pretty much how attention and existence are simultaneously being one moment, when one truly established in their presence beyond their personality, the advanced civilization is not necessarily something that one can even it's not like something we know what it's going to look like and then we can just build it, right? It's like as we update all systems fathomable, eventually they will lead towards an advanced system. And then the next phase of the question is, all right, so if human beings, so first we said, all right, human beings should avoid extinction. Then we're like, why? What do we do after we avoid extinction? And I say to build an advanced civilization. Right now the next question is why? How do we build an advanced civilization? And I'm saying it's the efficiency of every system. So efficiency is required, at least an efficient vision of some sort of honor for a greater function of civilization rather than the story it tells itself. Right? Stories come and go in the mind of man. They are like guests, they're like travelers. I can tell you how, like you might not believe how many stories my attention has lived through, how many types of senses of self. Every day I've woken up and I'm like, is this me in the mirror? And then I live, and then I come and sleep, and then I wake up the next day realizing there is something new. And that new means there's more to know, more to see, and life forever grows, There is something beautiful. I mean, because existence is not that difficult to respond to, And I'm not talking on behalf of something like generalized. Of course, I'm just one person sharing, but I feel an advanced civilization is the maturity of a species. It's like our species is immature. There is internal conflict. Groups of human beings have colored land, in their brains, and in some sense wars are taking place, and in the whole time it's as if just a bunch of creatures on a rock, just a bunch of creatures on a rock. This should be the mantra that will bring the advanced civilization, where we realize truly it is the greatest performance of creatures in the void, the dance of evolution, reaching its final hour. And when I say final hour, I predict that something strange may happen. If there is a technological interference, human beings are going to stop being human before the biology is transcended. And if we manage to somehow preserve our natural humanism and we echoed in time thousands and thousands of years, eventually we will reach a point where we've been there, done that. I mean, what would the species do after we've, after we've had sex all over the universe, like endless overpopulation, endless human beings entering reality. Imagine immortal technology happening, and so human beings are forever in the space-time continuum, walking as sort of immortal spheres of awareness in the realm. There is an approach to thought, I would say, where if the person, let's say you do entertain thoughts, I personally don't. For me, I've kind of like, I've seen beyond language and experiential truth to the moment, my own truth, you can say, where I have lived through language enough, but I will tell you, it's as if somebody, let's say problems arise as thoughts, and then when we try to find a solution, we say the person is thinking. Let's say in some sense thoughts are in some sense problems, and we're trying to find the ultimate solution. What that means is, out of all the information accessible to you, your eyes as a human being are wondering about the beyond. They're wondering about in some sense the one idea that captures all ideas, and that idea is existence, really. And existence, it's poetic. Anybody talks about existence, they become a great poet otherwise, because it is the deepest and realest thing. We get emotional when we experience reality. We become robotic when we experience the illusion, So truth is a rhythmic, dynamic, free state. And the illusion is a sort of robotic, slow, tired kind of system. Imagine a very interesting idea. In certain, let's say, cultures, they saw a spirit to nature, and we can animate an identity to the spirit of nature. So imagine there are these giant spirits just walking in the forest that we human beings can't see. Just imagine that idea for a moment. And so we look at a human being, and we're like, a human being is made of smaller particles. Then we look at this giant spirit walking in nature, this spirit being, let's say, and then we're like, okay, it's made of smaller spirits, right? And it's like we are accessing the small dimension of actually an incredibly big event. Like there's nothing greater than a universe happening in one moment. The hidden power of humanity is that in its collective harmony, it creates an atmosphere for internal innovation to go to the outer. What that means is internally complex systems are presenting, higher dimensional outer phenomena, right? That means a person like, let's say they paint a wall and they say it's the paint molecules kind of overlaying upon, covering like the wall molecules, That means something, it's like a every event in nature is multidimensional. Everything is. Everything based on the type of intelligent viewer that finds it is granted intelligence. That means this cup in front of me, it's just a red cup, with white writing on it, and the cup has no existence, but when my attention goes to it, suddenly a Tim Hortons cup exists. So our attention is the life giver to phenomenology in our experience. And an advanced civilization has to start from how we pilot our attention. And it's on some level I'm saying, hey, every human being in the world, deep down, what do you want for your species? What do you want for the outcome of this existential world, Some people want to transcend it, some people, want to never leave it, It's like an airport, to be honest, this planet, lot of events and unique events in nature, unique types of consciousness is in some sense entering and going, just to be a person in history who called it, my bet is that the civilization will become really the airport archetype in the future. Flying airports, pretty much. That means our sky cities are gonna be like flying airports, really. And of course, we can't have successful sky cities in the future unless we actually have successful force field technologies developed. Unless we can have invisible nets that can catch, cities, we can't really attempt too many sky cities. Because the sky city is the ultimate evolution of the balcony. It's like a flying balcony. One can even go as far as to say the flying carpet in the Aladdin story was a sort of, one of the pioneering thoughts in the development of sky cities. Where it's either we move in the world or the world moves and we move with that. Like 100% in the future, there's gonna be, off-land real estate. There's gonna be probably real estate agents. It's like, hey, you wanna buy this land in the sky? And the person's like, I don't know, I gotta think about it. I don't know if I'm ready to live in a house that is endlessly traveling till the end of time. Can you imagine how many senior citizens on this planet would have incredible, a phase of their seniority if they were in a house where every time they stepped out of the house, imagine senior homes were floating all around the town and the city, and pretty much all over the planet, just cities were flying over the planet. Imagine right? So imagine the moment we actually ensure like incredible sky city technology, that would be the moment where we evolve beyond nationalism as a species. Why? Because the sky has become any border you want. Anybody can be like, yo, you know. And what I mean by what I mean by this is that pretty much imagine like right now we look at the sky, we only see clouds. In the future, we're gonna see buildings in the sky, right? And so that building has a superior value because, in some sense, it's like an endless cinema, your backyard. You just step out and you see. It's kind of like how the astronauts experience the Earth, when they're like looking from the space station. But it's like, not that far away. Can you imagine there's like a schoolyard where the kids are playing and it's raining, right? And the kids are like, "Oh man, we can't play soccer now." Suddenly this giant real estate property just hovers above the school and there's no rain and the kids play, you know. A sky city just passes by and like suddenly like, the rainstorm of part of the land in some sense is avoided. You know what I mean? I'm saying like the future is just how we interact with with the space of reality in ways that we have never done before, and every person has an option, right? We haven't reached the sophistication as a species where we can just be like novel jumpers, like the movie Jumper, where the being was traveling, but he was traveling to where he could remember. Now imagine the future paradigm, where you, in some sense, travel to your vision of the future. And in your inner realms, a person can teleport. In the outer realms, you gotta literally take the train. In the subtitle, I've written The Grand Happening. This is a concept, I could say, from my inner verse, where I pretty much looked at life and I'm like, what's going on here? And that's what I realized, it's something that's going on. That means the simplest view to life is like it's an event taking place, an intelligent event, this grand happening. Now, what we can do is participate in it because that's the only reason we are embodied, right? It's as if we're not just like, if you just look at the human body, it doesn't make sense. But if you look at the human body and in regards to its environment, it suddenly makes sense. Now the human intelligence has an inner environment, and this inner environment is overlaid on the outer environment, and then all the athletes in the world, they're like, I gotta work harder. And what are they working harder towards? To their inner reality becoming an outer reality. So the advanced civilization begins from behind your eyes, and then in accordance to how you live and how true you're staying towards your principles of what moves towards the advancing civilization. It's like once you create civilization, all that is left for it is to advance, and we've done that. Our ancestors took giant leaps for us to be in this kind of world we're in now. We have the sophistication of language again, the sophistication of memory. So in our inner realms, if somebody can see a better way of doing something, that's how civilization advances. And this has to just be implemented on a global scale. Now, what do we measure the better with? We measure it with freedom and an absolute unhonorable, like samurai level, Roman Empire kind of level of honor, right? Towards the principle that what is the most divine, what is the most instant sign of divinity is the human being. So we have to become honorably defenders of our nature against the world that is endlessly trying to change it. And especially there's the danger of like cyberspace taking our attention outside of our biological bodies as well. because the hourglass and the sands that fall from the hourglass are the only prophecy. That at some point, the opportunity and the time for individuals to build an advanced civilization, that opportunity may become less in the future. Right now, immobilized, so we can utilize individual character and to have human beings participate in building an advanced civilization. Can you imagine, in my science fiction novel set in the year 5025, I've envisioned this, but what is going on there, it's like pretty much artists became politicians, and then nations, instead of competing over a military budget, they were competing over which has the most incredible nation. That means nations were showing off the beauty of their efficient advancement, right? So it was as if which nation is the most creative, and then all nations at some point of competitively and egotistically trying to be more artistic than each other realize they are all part of the grand artwork we call humanity. So the enlightened society in my science fiction novel is a sort of government that is treating everything in the world as artwork, and ultimately human beings as tourists into the world. So in some sense, there is no right and wrong. Every person's idea and their beliefs or disbeliefs, they are just unique perceptions of them as a unique DNA, right? So in some sense, really nobody can judge you other than you as a being, right? So the enlightened society, the government in the future, I've written, understands this, because really what it is just trying to make the most incredible tourist experience for 8 billion people on this planet. That means really the advanced civilization in the future is a resource station and tourist agency, global tourist agency, even interdimensional beings. In my science fiction novel, I've gone all out, but anyways, the enlightened society had realized that man has an ability to change his mind. If we can change our mind, what can we judge? Who can we judge? Right? If somebody can judge a person and be like, you're the most terrible, ignorant fool I have witnessed in this lifetime, and that person, in some sense, is just, in some sense, one angle of how the universe saw a moment. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm saying that nobody can judge us, because if in the future the species fails, we're all idiots. If in the future the species advances, we're all geniuses. So in treating ideology as unique artwork, the future has ignored war, because art is multidimensionally tolerant. That means art is probably going to be a way where if extraterrestrials landed in the future, we're going to be like, do you guys create art? And we just like paint with extraterrestrials, and that would be like the bond of man and the sky, the bond of the earth and the sky. Really what it is another level of intelligent activity that surpasses physical law and sensory limitation is taking place when a person can imagine, like right now, this coffee cup in front of me, I can imagine it hovering in the air, right? I'm imagining it hovering in the air. Does it mean it moved there? No, but it means that there's a dimension of intelligence to the human being that is like a film over the physical film, and non-physical film is being played over the physical film, and I'm that person in history saying, hey, we should have globally the internal film be directed towards advancing communication, which means trying to understand as much as possible all the angles of perception before judgment. And when a person realizes something can have infinite angles of perception, then they in some sense stop judging, and the world changes, where you're no longer holding a hammer of judgment. You're actually kind of unarmed in your inner realms, and you have attained a sort of, I would say, wind-like movement. When you have a wind-like relationship with your own mind, I would say you have become a human being that whatever happens in the outer realms, you have realized something more. And so whatever happens in life, you will be found in your presence and the type of attention you cultivated in this life. Because we feel death is the end, but what if death is just the liftoff? What if our whole life we're running towards, this cliff, and right before we jump from the cliff, we need to have grown wings, and these wings are where we were in the life before it ended. I will make this note because this is simultaneously kind of my own digital archive, that I'm working on this book that will find the sunlight soon, called Civilization 2.0. You can say human beings, upon conscious evolution from an unconscious self as we move towards the conscious self, we had a sort of arrival into a dimensions where emotions can suddenly change our minds. So right now, I kind of perceive that the human species is actually this very sophisticated, crystal clear, advanced consciousness, or awareness, I should say, is pure awareness. It's just that right now we are going through this sort of phase of reality, and based on what we identify with, if we identify as our whole moment, or if we identify as just this certain relationship inside of with the contents of the moment. Because a person can be anything. A person can decide, and by the mere nature of their decision, their personality adjusts to the subjective role, right? Think of like a pilot, like an actual airplane pilot, right? The pilot is just, a friend when he's, just a friendly person, just like everyone else. When he's not piloting, but when he is piloting, the pilot is literally forgetting everyone else and just paying attention to the wheel, right? to the direction of the plane, right? So an advanced civilization would be like 8 billion human beings being like, whoa, we could build something advanced here, let's do it, They say the future is coming, but I'll be honest, in accordance to how the present holds itself, the future is already here. Right now, we can imagine there was some sort of global survey, and in this global survey, we asked how many human beings on the planet feel that there's a future beyond extinction, and how many feel there isn't. And I will tell you, probably most people will feel there is no future beyond extinction. But I'll tell you, the future beyond extinction is just the future that is not image-based. So when we transcend images as as a moment of being, we actually find union with our own, like all the content in their mind. What does that mean? That means if I identify as a person, as a personality, I'm like, okay, in one corner of the universe looking at everything else in the universe. If I identify as the presence of my whole moment of awareness, then I am not the content of the moment. I am all of it. That means it doesn't matter if I see myself, it doesn't matter if I see the sky, the universe, anything, animate, inanimate, they're all part of how the moment is being itself, right? And so when you really go into that presence of being, I feel what happens is, again, a nullification point. You come to like the zero kind of you come to the ground of your perception, right? And from the ground you lift off again. So I would say it is like a rebirth through a completely different understanding of the context of the world. A rebirth of self-identity. The moment you realize, just get a glimpse that, all right, there's something more than just the thoughts we simulate in every moment, that's when I would say a civilization automatically becomes advanced. That means it's kind of like the Rubik's Cube. Part of the algorithm for trying to build an advanced civilization is multidimensional perception, kindness and tolerance, even beyond reason. That means even if it doesn't make sense, we're required to be kind. Why? Because we don't know how human beings carry their minds, right? And so we're all living together here in this space on this planet, and so we got to have a very smooth travel points of mind. Where that means human beings have to realize they're not just one personality their whole life. Every moment is like a room where the stimulus of the outer realms realigns the inner realms. So we have never been the same person. We have just been this kind of unknown watcher of a known biological body that in its activation and expression, it is the identity it believes. The legend of the castles in the sky are upon us, this idea that is archaically revived. And it'll revive more the more people hear this podcast. But really it's our intent on life, some moments a person can have the right idea, but they can't, they might not be the right person for that idea, A person's heart has a freedom to perceive the future in a way where a person's, I would say, brain does not, right? The brain's like, before I can get to the future, I have to deal with everything that's being in the present right now. But I would say the heart, which is the awareness of the whole moment, the heart of hearts, as some poets have said. It's as if human beings were found in a biological simulation. They managed to escape the biological simulation, the objective simulation, and they came to a subjective simulation. Now the human beings have managed to escape the subjective simulation, which means the species is evolving beyond, is going towards the language threshold. The language threshold will mean an ultimate evolution of civilization. That means an advanced civilization is so advanced that all the human beings that want to keep using language, it provides service to, and all the human beings that don't want to use language, it provides service to. That means silent beings will be members of an advanced civilization. Right? Because the consideration is not right or wrong, it is what is the information out there, then the species strategizes, right? But now the species doesn't have accurate global information, right? So right now we're kind of like literally, some people may make fun of like Amazonian tribes and look at how primitive they are, but we are the same thing. It's just we have more shinier spears, So the difference with this is, in some sense, the tribes eventually come to a common understanding of the space. And look at what has happened through the evolution of our intelligence, right? We can, in some sense, come into agreement, not in only one dimension, but multiple. That means in a long enough conversation, there will be many moments that people agree. Let's say person A and person B are having a long conversation, and they're just sharing their inner realms, let's say. And so there will be many moments where there will be intersection of the meaning of reality, right? And there will be many moments where the lines of vision will not intersect, right? And this is why honesty is important in any act of communication, because you have one lifetime to be honest. You have one lifetime to, in some sense, stay honorable to the simple. Another thing that is very important, of course, I just realized I gotta mention this, when it comes to an advanced civilization waking up. So an advanced civilization is the sum total of all individualized intelligent activity. Now, some of these individual activities have become collective, so it's not just the free will of human beings that we got to consider in the equation. We got to consider the free will of institutions that want to survive, the free will of businesses that want to survive, right? So an advanced civilization has to, in some sense, be compassionate enough to have room for everyone, right? But now the challenge becomes, how would I say it? It's like the children of the next generations are the ones deciding whatever analysis we make, right? So it's all about the wave of human activity on this planet. If we were to create a sort of chart and say, let's say 3 levels, okay? Let's say small, medium, large, okay? So so there is the small states of consciousness that are required to be taken care of. There are medium states of consciousness that are required to be taken care of by an advanced civilization. And let's say there's large states of consciousness that require to be taken care of by an advanced civilization. So the children that are being born, that is considered as the small state, and that is the most important state, because if we can make the life of the human child way more efficient in its youth, it will have more access to advanced expression in its, in some sense, what do you call it? In its future. Because life is phases, right? Everybody goes through phases of life, assuming that they're only one person, but really, that we have 2 brain hemispheres. We'd be kidding. You know, it's like there's a creative dimension of opportunity and freedom, and then there's a analytical dimension of containment and closure. That means one part of the brain is endlessly opening up to things, the other part of the brain is endlessly closing things down, right? And so the frontal lobe is like how consciousness is between 2 worlds at once, right? Because duality is being embraced as knowledge on this planet, you know, and this is why I'm like, our species is no way ready. If there was an internal, inner realm extraterrestrial invasion, like, our species doesn't have the defense systems for that. Why? Because the greatest defense system to an internal, to a mental turbulence is a self-awareness, right? Because an advanced civilization is allowing itself to be the ultimate archetype in the void. It is the first time collective successful permission. It's as if the whole universe will assist us, because the advanced civilization is like the hardest problem to solve on the planet. We are not just 8 billion bodies that we think there's going to be overpopulation. We're 8 billion minds, and the mind can create, the mind can direct the inner realm observance towards some sort of engagement with the outer realms, right? Like, what is writing? Writing is like you are immortalizing the thought of a moment where throughout the day you have many thoughts. I apologize. This was on mute. I was just saying, when your inner realms move very quickly, what ends up happening is through selfless witnessing, the mind can fathom way more different types of selves freely. So what happens is when the body becomes still, the mind becomes to move more. Like the mind moves more. As you observe this movement of mind, eventually thoughts come that you cannot resist becoming. So when you become that thought, you teleport out of that rhythm. In meditation, they have such pure concentration that they reach a point where the thoughts can't touch them. The person's just watching their mind like a film. Like when you're in the cinema, you don't get affected by the content of the movie. You know, you're just watching the movie. If it's tragic, you cry. If it's you know, if it's funny, you laugh. But you know it's a movie, and you know at the end of the theater, you get up and you go to a different reality. You know, we go home after the movie theater, and the film of life, it is important. You know, and you know, it's like somebody could say, Mr. Within, does the world really need philosophers? And I'll be like, the only reason we do is because the unknown will be engaged inevitably directly. So the best thing we can do is try to create a fearless species which in some sense retaliates against its existential dilemma. What greater thing can we do? To me, believe it or not, I would say I may be a bit old school, but to me, we're all on a giant battlefield and it's Normandy. Like literally, we're like, you know, a giant army of 8 billion creatures on a rock. But what are we fighting? We're fighting the unknown possibilities of our own continuity. Our own discontinuity. Right? Because the human nature is to survive. This is called cornered animal psychology. Cornered animal psychology means, and pretty much for those people who are functioning through artificial belief systems, the moment they're pushed out of their belief system, they become violent. Why? Because how else should I understand the world? I have to believe in something. But I'll tell you, we're not that singular dimension of an animal. We are multidimensional in the sense that your memories are moments that happened, but still you have access to. Take that in, right? That means just sitting down and being like, okay, let me see, you know, Mr. Within told me to see what my memory is. Let me just close my eyes and see how do I move? How does my imagination happen for me, right? That's what I want to see in the species. This kind of, you know what it is? Let me tell you how advanced civilizations happen. Individuals just activate and they start caring for the advancement and the efficiency and the, successful journey of the species towards the future. I mean, I'm really stretching this. But you know, it would just be like suddenly some human beings started glowing on the planet and people were like, yo, why are these people glowing? And the reason they were glowing is because they have a role to play in the evolution of the civilization. Some people, I would say, they're kind of like bystanders or they're like viewers, you know. You can say like extraterrestrials right now, if building a civilization was a soccer game, they're like audience members, right? So the audience member is not directly engaged. So those right now in the front lines of human manifestation or in Vedic thought, we're at the bottom of Mount Meru. Mr. Within is saying we're going to advance civilization to a point where rather than judgment isolating us from our collective efficient possibilities, in some sense a multidimensional tolerance. That means parents are teaching their children, like imagine in the future parents bring their children and they're like, all right kids, I'm going to explain something to you, right? Everything and the parent, imagine, gives the children like an object or their toy or whatever and says, you see how you can look at this toy from different ways? You can look at people in different ways. You can look at nations in different ways. You can look at everything in different ways because every day we are doing it inevitably, right? Like you don't say it that intensely to the kids, but you know what I mean? You know, you share this idea that there is multiple ways to see something, and even you could say the secular-minded could do this through a circle, right? You draw a circle, you draw a center of the point, and you draw all the degrees. you know. And while you're explaining to, let's say, a new human to the human system, to humanity, like what a sphere is, like the central point, the radius, the 360 degrees, the circumference, right? As you're explaining that, you're also using that as a metaphor where there is every moment in the space-time continuum, if it was taken as a photograph, it cannot be judged. It's just like the color blue. Like the color blue is blue, right? So a singular snapshot of a moment of existence is like it cannot be judged. It is judged in comparison to the expected result of the environment of the outer realms, or it is judged in accordance to how much it trusts its inner realms or not, right? So a person, like I could suddenly midway through this talk be like, I don't trust myself to speak, and I just like get out of here. Right? So that could totally happen, right? People listening, it's like it was an interesting talk, but at some point there was an emotional ejection from the talk. Just like we eject from an airplane when it's about to hit the ground. Like, what do you call it? Like the pilot's protocol, In a book called Civilization 2.0, I've shared this idea that 8 billion human beings are on this very strange ocean, and they're in this giant boat, and this boat is this giant vertical boat, right? Just this rectangular boat, and it's so giant, and it's filled with 8 billion people, this boat, and at the end of it, you can't, like the one end can't see the other end. And this is civilization, this giant rectangular boat. And guess what? The water that it's the unknown waters that it's traveling on is not like blue. It is the solar system underneath, right? Imagine just like the transparent nature of water, and instead of it being blue underneath, it is in some sense just the crystal visible universe. So in the unknown waters of the universe, this giant boat is going, and we're all on it, right? And now we have reached a point where there's this narrative that we have not taken care of the boat, and there's holes in the boat that one side of the boat see and the other side of the boat don't even believe the boat is sinking, right? And so in the middle of this, we're like, what do we do? And somebody is suggesting, hey, let's build an airplane. Because in emptiness, there is no shore at the edge of the universe. Not at least one that we can reach. Even if we rode light beams like horses towards the edge of the universe, we still wouldn't be able to. Like, it would still be an incredibly long journey. Potentially infinite journey. That means one has to also be conscious in whatever work they do that they don't get transformed by the work to a point that they don't remember their nature, right? Because if the civilization is going to become design oriented, that means for the first time there's going to be serious archetypes in all the creative fields of education, right? That means there is going to be a sort of renaissance of human beings realizing they're alive once and their eyes matter as much as they care for the world. And something I will say for people who are interested in meditation, be very mindful, because once a person truly finds their presence and their mind ideologically expands and they witness the moment, it in some sense, like they need to have reasons to in some sense humanize. So what I mean by that is that live life like a playful, ignorant fool. Just live it, just go for it. But at the same time, realize at some point you're going to be the watcher, the audience of the memories you create for yourself. So if we were to wonder what kind of memories is the human being through its decision making creating for itself, we would say something where Isaac Asimov was like, violence is the last refuge of the incompetent. That means if there is a possibility to solve a situation with the least amount of energy, it should be done. In the future, when I say efficiency, it's like we're trying to find the fastest route, but not our speed kind of diminishing our mindfulness, right? It's as if in order to pilot, the pilot has to feel the plane of existence like its body, right? It has to know exactly, it has to feel the edge of the plane. Or it's the same when driving, by the way. Good drivers, they are literally the car. That means they can feel somehow if there's a car about to like, graze the side of their car. It's just like the car's movement. They have identified, it's as if their bodies, the driver, I think these are imagine a taxi driver for like 30 years, right? That taxi driver has become like, you know what it is? It's as if the more still your body is, the more the movement of the car is being identified by your consciousness as the body, right? So you can instantly feel the edges of your car, right? So it's as if in the inner realms, if the brain is copy pasting the outer realms, you are actually creatively enhancing it. So skill is actually novelty, but incorporated with the wisdom of the ancestors. It's as if it's all about unknown variable and known variable management. Known variables, they have color, they have shape, they have depth. Unknown variables, they have no content, right? And for example, in monotheistic traditions, the concept of God is inconceivable. Literally, the book says it's inconceivable. So I don't know what people are worshiping, right? They're worshiping the name. But the reality of it is everything. That means it's kind of like a clue where it's like God is in everything, but people only go worship it in temples. So what is up with that, right? That means it's like, what kind of God are you worshiping? What the God that your memory could hold, or the God which is inconceivable, right? Because in the religious narrative, monotheistic Abrahamic traditions, let's say, in those religions, the narrative is that nobody knows you better than God, right? That means there's a relationship with the concept of God that surpasses even family, right? This is the whole religious view, right? Now, this relationship with God, if it is shaped, that's kind of like, you can say, instead of idol worship, it's ideal worship, right? So it's counter the aim of the religious ideology, right? That means the religion is something totally different than a religious person, right? Because the person has humanized dimensions of influence, but the religious text is just words on the empty page, right? And so the first scholarly effort should be the disconnection of the humanized component and then the dehumanized. And when we look at the dehumanized, it's honestly going to just be geometry. Everything to me is just geometry. And of course, emotions are like enlightened masters teaching, the designer how to see a world beyond just shape. In an advanced civilization, all members of that advanced civilization will be too busy helping each other to be able to even ask for help. That means imagine a civilization that takes care of your blind spots rather than every organism's individuality judging each other. Judgment's gonna happen till the end of time, I'll tell you something, I'm not gonna name who, but someone very close to me has this incredible arguing ability where he creates the past of the person, and when he's being judged, he automatically takes the judgment to the past of the person. That means imagine you're someone who, you drink coffee and somebody says, don't drink coffee. Instead of you being like, okay, I won't drink coffee, instead of saying that, the person says, you've drank coffee, have you never drank coffee in your life? Or what are you saying? You know what I mean? So the person takes the attention to the past of something else. And really it's attention games, And I would say the hardest perhaps decision for the psychology of the human animal is, should I stay true to my inner realms, or should I transform for the sake of what the outer realms wants? And I would say an advanced civilization happens when you're actually being true to your inner realms, and eventually, as you are true to your inner realms, to the nature of how your mind functions, then it will find an opportunity to globally function. You know, it's like a Buddhist who believes in reincarnation, you know, filming like, a bird on a branch, and then wondering if this bird is gonna, reincarnate as an actor its next lifetime, People are told to take care of themselves, they're told to take care of their family, they're told to take care of their nation, their societies, their nations, their neighborhoods, you know. But we are not being told to take care of our world. And if we are to take care of our world, we can't just take care of our own biased truth. So that's the challenge of a collective system where we are like, no way. So not only are we just 8 billion inner universes that haven't been shared with each other, haven't been globalized, but if they were, every person would have their own universe. It's an endless, infinite spiral of possible thought. Just take this in, that if 8 billion unique universes had access to each other at the same time, there would be 8 billion versions of 8 billion versions of 8 billion versions of universes in impossible, fathomable universes. So the study of, I would say, ontology it's kind of like a joke to a time traveler. You know what I mean? They ask the person, are you a time traveler? And the person's like, sure. And they're like, what do you mean, sure? And the person's like, I can travel through time. And the person's like, tell me, And the person's like, right now, I'm remembering yesterday when I ate a sandwich, In my inner realms, I'm experiencing yesterday. I'm traveling through time, Do you see? Do you see how it's like we are connecting time as an invisible theme, which is a trial segmentation, and we're all filtering the whole world based on this, right? But nature has a silence to it that before language became reality, it's as if there was something here. An evolutionary return to nature. Because life always, there's resistance. Even when we walk, there is friction between our shoes, the surface of our shoes and the ground, right? That means the whole nature of reality is when you move in the world, you eventually experience resistance. Now the idea is, how far are we going beyond that resistance? And those who get identified by suffering, their attention gets shackled to the inferior. That means, imagine every moment of life. It doesn't matter where you are, what you are. There is a superior resonance. I have personally